Go for it, Nick.
Okay. Well, welcome all. Here we are for our August meeting, and I'm looking at the agenda here. We're going to firstly have an introductory discussion, and then get on with some meat and potatoes items to do with machinery matters and what I think of bureaucratic matters about structuring the incorporation of OKF Australia, which I'm hoping we might be able to handle by exception. Anyway, David, with your encouragement, I'll just launch into what I was going to talk about and then invite others to join the conversation.
Yep. So Nick, I'll just quickly brief. We've got about 5 items on the agenda. We will try to keep it to an hour, which Nick always does great. As per usual, we'll begin it with an intro discussion topic, which we've labeled activists versus economists. So take it away, Nick, and tell us about some of the things you've learned and experiences you've gone around the world almost of recent.
Yeah. Well, not almost. I did. And by the way, for other people's benefit, I didn't label it activists versus economists. I don't think the economists are playing a particularly useful role. And anyway, economics, or looking at the economic aspects of these things, is really it's an important tip of an iceberg, but it's an iceberg which is social as well as economic anyway. So I presented on open data in 2 places, in Berlin at the Open Data Festival, the Open Knowledge Festival, which was I'd never even been to Berlin before, and I'd not been to an Open Knowledge Festival before, which was great. So we can talk a bit about that if people want to. And I presented on the work that we'd done for a media network, which I've talked to people on board meetings, at board meetings like this before. And if somebody wants to put into Google lateral economics and media and open data, they'll very quick. In fact, I know how to even bring it up even more quickly, so I'll put it in myself. There it is. So if you want to, you can click on that and go to our report. So we argued in that report, we were asked by a media network to provide an economic assessment of the economic value of open data in the G20 context, argued that it was a major microeconomic reform and would generate something like $16 billion to the Australian economy alone, and commensurately large amount throughout the G20. So I presented this at Berlin, and it started to occur to me, I was very interested in what the activists were doing in the Open Knowledge Festival. It was very much activist, sort of inspired and driven. There's great things going on in sort of trying to harass the corporate sector into higher levels of transparency around things like tax, and also particularly around extractive industries. But the sorts of things that we'd highlighted as really big opportunities to take the open data agenda further were really just not on people's radar. And the kinds of things we've talked about are, there's my example of public-private partnerships, with the classic example of doing something with a website like 23andMe. I've proposed a thing called Windows on Workplaces, where by helping a standard to develop and supporting it and promoting it, we might be able to see a lot more data that the corporate sector has, and certainly that the public sector has, about employee engagement with workforces. We might be able to see a lot more of that open, and all sorts of large benefits would come out of that, from improving worker satisfaction, workplace engagement, and productivity. And it sort of occurred to me that I was sort of pretty excited about this sort of agenda. It's new. It disappoints me that economists, policy economists, aren't talking about it. The Productivity Commission doesn't talk about it. I'm about to write an op-ed for the Financial Review to talk about some of that stuff, but in an even wider context, and talk about all the things that economists aren't talking about. But not only were the economists and the public servants not really talking about it much, the activists weren't talking about it because it doesn't really fit the sort of model of activism, which is a sort of let's go and get the bad guys. There's a fair bit of that in activism.
Can I ask at this point, Nick, can I ask at this point then who you would see as taking this sort of work forward? I mean, as you've just mentioned, you don't really, it's not sort of the remit of the traditional activists. So who do you think should be doing this?
Well, the public service should be doing it, academics should be doing it, economists should be doing it, none of them are doing it. I can also say activists should be doing it because activists should, I'm just asserting that off my own bat, we're all allowed to say what people should do, and I think activists, if they want to make the world a better place, this is a big way in which they can make the world a better place. And one of the things that attracts me to the agenda is, in fact, it's not a terribly adversarial agenda. It's an agenda which is pursued to just help the world kind of find the next large gains it can make to the way we live. But it isn't by sort of taking anybody on particularly. Yes, David.
So Nick, and this is so I really like your report, and we kind of looked at it last time. And I'm just wondering, as you've traveled around, it's really interesting to hear you talk about this because this is something that we ourselves here in Australia find. We have the ambassadors, GovHack, all the bottom up, then we have the top down, what's happening in the governments. Are you getting a better feeling for, some pragmatic actions we might advise and recommend? For example, is there something we should be taking to the ambassadors and suggesting local events in the various capitals, or is there something we should be pressing on government agencies to request, whether that's state or federal, to get engaged?
Yeah, good question. I'll answer that by finishing what I was going to say, which was that I sort of talked about what I spoke about in Berlin, and it was just in the back of my mind. I was just observing it, and then I gave a presentation in London to the Open Data Institute, and I didn't say, these bloody activists won't give me any help with these agendas, and they're really important. And I just talked to them. And the activists and a number of people in the room said, well, what you're really saying to us is that what us activists are doing isn't really as important as the sort of stuff you've talked about. And I sort of looked all shy and cute and said, yeah, maybe I am. And they were really quite receptive to that. So it wasn't the point wasn't made in an adversarial way. And when you, David, say, well, what data could we get released, and what about hackathons? This is, I'm all in favour of data and hackathons, and I'm not arguing that we shouldn't keep trying to push that, but it's kind of part of the problem because people want to build stuff, and much of the sort of stuff that I'm talking about in that report is stuff that gets built at a higher level, at a sort of policy level. And I'm not really trying to say you guys should do anything other than what you're doing. You should do whatever you feel like, including going and having a game of golf or anything else if you want to. But the sad thing is that economic reform got pushed by all sorts of interests and got led by economists in the 1970s and 80s, and you would have thought that this agenda that we've sketched out is a logical extension of that can make the world a better place and I might say in a less adversarial way with no real losers, as there often are from other forms of economic reform. And unfortunately, these other people don't seem to have the imagination to do it. But if somebody wanted to get into some activism, they could say, why isn't, there are a few things. You could say, why isn't the Australian Public Service Commission data that sits behind their State of the Service report, why isn't it available agency by agency? We could make a big fuss about that. And there are those kinds of things. Why aren't we using data in health and education to improve the quality of matching between our teachers and our classrooms? Because we found some research that showed that if you get better matching between teachers and classrooms, it's a lot easier than getting better quality teachers. That's something we should also try and do, but that's a long-term agenda. If you do that, you get part of the effect, you get a similar effect to higher quality teaching. So those are some things we can at least talk about, but they're not really things that we can have hackathons around or just say, you know, they're just a bit, they require a somewhat higher level of conception, I think.
So Nick, I'm going to jump around the group. We'll spend 5 more minutes on this agenda item. I just want to get some views from our panelists. Pia, who's joining us as a guest, Pia, would you like to say a little bit, any thoughts or ideas on that, or what kind of?
Yeah, sure. So I'm just going to be careful because obviously I wear several hats, and one of my hats is that I run DataGov.au. So I guess the first thing I'll say is I agree that both there is a need to get more data out there and to use that data effectively. But big picture, I think that the real, and this is me personally speaking, and I'm not representing any of my bosses or whatever, my personal perspective is that the big picture opportunity that Nick's talking about is really that government as a platform concept where government opens up its data and its system APIs as by default, and government continues to deliver the services and policies and stuff of government, but it creates that opportunity for competition in the service delivery layer of the market, if you like, and having that competitive service delivery framework creates greater opportunities for society, opportunities for industry, opportunities for even for government to get better outcomes for the society. So it's not just about opening data, it's about shifting the perspective from a government-centric perspective to government as a platform, and government as just one of the many nodes in a internet of nodes, if you will, that are all converging together to solve problems of the 21st century, rather than trying to do it in isolation from each other. I guess that's probably all I should do. The last thing I'll just say is if people want data and can identify data that they need, they should request it on the public data request site, so data.gov.au.ideascale.com, and it's worth noting that agencies are starting to open stuff up by default because they're seeing it in their best interest. It's helping them with their efficiencies, with their service delivery, and to get better policy outcomes across government. And I think a lot of progress has been made, particularly in the last 12 months. And I think and I'm certainly seeing from my job perspective that things are moving increasingly fast at the moment, and it's going to be quite exciting to see what happens over the next 12 months. I'll probably leave it there, but hopefully that's...
Peter, I'm going to hold you there. Jump to Stephen. Stephen, you want to give us your 2 pence on this?
Yeah, sure. So I was in the same event as Nick in Berlin just recently, and I saw a lot of the activists there and lots of the projects that are going on there. They're all very, very interesting. The economic perspective on this, I guess, is a conversation that is quite common amongst politicians. It's quite common across bureaucrats as well, at least whether they're being influenced by political discussion or not. I guess at the technical level and the community level, I think the kind of role that OKF can play, at least in Australia, is helping to join these different conversations together to have a single message and bring that message to the right people to get the right outcomes. So if you've got an activist project or a community group that need more access to government, then that's the role of OKF to help them have that voice and carry that through. Or conversely, if you've got a government agency that wants to have more access to hackers, we can do a little bit of matchmaking there. Some of that may be serendipitous, some of it may be quite contrived and actually constructed.
Brilliant. Thank you, Stephen. I'm going to jump to Marcus. Marcus, thoughts?
So the perspective I bring is from the research community, where there's sort of a similar discussion about making data available and what's the benefit. And part of it was the carrot and stick question about, well, why should a researcher make their data publicly available, apart from the obvious fact that they had taxpayer funding?
Yeah, well, that's a fairly obvious fact.
Sorry, Nick?
Yeah, that's a pretty obvious fact.
Yeah. Now, I mean, there's sensitivities and edge cases in that conversation, but in the broad, it's opening up. But I think, you know, what you're highlighting is a gap in the communication between you want to have an outcome that is driven by an input of data that is made available from a range of agencies. You need the skills and awareness to take advantage of that data, and you need the imagination of somebody to actually say, we have a problem, what data do we need? Or we have this data, what problem can it solve? Or what issue can it highlight? And I think there's an opportunity to put out a broad brush vision that sort of says, look, there's all these data sets emerging, there's all these tools emerging, and here are some really nice examples. And there's stuff that's come out of the UK, demonstrating the benefits of opening up data is something we don't do in Australia very well at all yet. We tinker nicely, but we don't do much of it.
Yeah.
Excellent point, Marcus. Nick, I'll give you the last word. I'm just gonna jump to Fiona to keep us on time. Fiona, your 2 thoughts. Nick, we'll definitely come back to you for the final summary and word.
Yeah, I guess my concern is just, we hear, there are a lot of reports and recommendations which do the rounds, but it's how we take that next step to really tangible outcomes. And I suppose it's similar to the conversation we've been having around GovHack, about how we make the leap from a bunch of clever hacks over a weekend to something that's really going to endure and be useful. And I suppose, as Clark has said, maybe there's a place for us in demonstrating, finding some case studies and demonstrating the usefulness and the benefits which can flow from applications of open data, that it's not enough for data to be open, that you do have to do things with it.
Fantastic. I'm going to jump over to Anne now. Anne, your 2 pence, and then I'll finally go to Michael.
Okay, thank you. I was at New South Wales State Government Innovation Roundtable just yesterday, and some perspectives on that are they think that sharing data is a great idea. They want to do it, but there's a few barriers in the way. One is they're worried about the quality of the data and the risk of releasing something that isn't quite clean, so they need help with that. Another one is they're not quite sure how to do it. They're not quite sure what are the best formats, schemas, APIs, and so on with which to do it, so they could use a hand with technical advice and assistance, hands-on assistance. And the other one is they don't really know how to engage with the community, with the hacker community, with startups, with commercials, in order to create some pull to prioritize what they're releasing. So I think it would really help them if they had some perspective on what data people actually want and what they want to do with it, so they could prioritize their activities.
Brilliant. Thank you, Anne. And we'll go to Michael, and then we'll jump to our chair to sum it up.
So my take on what Nick said is it sounds very much like what people are talking about, evidence-based policy development and evaluation. A lot of policy is developed in a bit of a vacuum, and so using good data to develop policy and then to test whether it's actually delivered the outcomes is something that a lot of people are talking about, but not a lot of people are doing. Some people at NICTA actually have been engaged with an education with the people who are doing the new curriculum development for Australia about using data analysis to determine how to make that curriculum most effective. Trial it, see what the factors are, and then look for those factors elsewhere so that they make sure that they get the right fit. That's just an example of perhaps data-driven policy. Cheers.
Brilliant. Thank you. And Nick, take us away with the kind of summing that up, and then we'll move on with the agenda for the rest of the week.
Okay. Well, look, I won't try and sum it up. I think it's been a good discussion. I will make a couple of comments. One of the things that the Brits have done, and I think the Brits are just way out in front on so much of this stuff, is that they have. I spoke at the Open Data Institute. The Open Data Institute is a creature of the Cameron government that threw £10 million at this thing and said to Nigel Shadbolt, look, run a thing which is going to talk about open data, which is going to challenge us, which is going to develop, do all the things that will accelerate I won't call it a market, a sort of an ecosystem in open data. And they're doing, they're making lots of mistakes, as one does when one is doing new things. but the runs are already on the board that they're leading in so many different ways. My Data is an example where that's a whole new agenda of which I guess leads to my second point, which is that one of the things that I was trying to stress in the comments I made initially is that this agenda of getting government data out and doing stuff with it is really just the beginning. And so the Brits have moved on to the My Data strategy, which is about getting, liquefying, if you like, rather than opening, private data. So the My Data strategy is designed to, effectively is built on legislation which gives Britons the right to demand their data from companies that have it in machine readable form, and they can then put that in a secure repository and control it. Now, in fact, they won't control it. Most people won't control it by getting home from work and authorizing someone to do something with it. A broker will come to them and say, if you give me access to your data, I'll protect your privacy in these ways, and I'll use it to enable you to move banks more easily. I'll use it to get you specials from various people in the marketplace. I'll use it to help you find people, you know, clubs and things that you might be like to be a member of. And then there's the agenda that we sketched out in our report, which is things like Windows on workplaces, 23andMe, public-private partnerships. Just one other example I'll give you and then I'll stop. Investment advisors. We have lots of debate on investment advisors, and it's all drawn into what I call ideological panto. So everybody's talking about whether they can take commissions or not, but whether they can take commissions or not, will you be able to find a good investment advisor as opposed to a bad one? No, you won't. We won't be doing anything to do that, and yet it would be quite easy to build a system in which you wouldn't even have to regulate. Investment advisors would be invited to record a private portfolio, the performance of which would be tracked and reported on publicly, and people would be, and this would be publicized, and people would be free to ask why certain investment advisors weren't doing it, who was performing well and why, and so on. Lots and lots of things to think about, and I think we've just got to the beginning. Okay.
Thanks, Nick. I'm going to push us on to item number 1 of the agenda, which is the Secretary handover and responsibilities. In fact, I'm just going to quickly turn on my camera because all of us have a little round of applause to give to someone who's helped us quite a bit but is going to be moving on. Come here, Anna. Anna's down in Melbourne today. Nick is having a little event. And sadly, Anna is going to be moving on to another more exciting project, still in the NICTA family. And Laura, come on up. Laura is going to be taking over the role as co-secretary along with me.
Hi, Laura.
Hi.
Yes, please do. Everyone say hi.
Will you and Anna be at the dinner tomorrow night?
No.
Ah, that's a pity.
That's a free dinner. It's only for you.
Sorry. I didn't make that policy, but I am going to the dinner, so you know.
So just again, thank you so much, Anna, for all you've done getting us this stage to incorporation. Laura is going to take the reins and help us get incorporated. I've listed some things that we'll brief Laura on, and Anna will help get Laura up to speed on doing the secretary duties along with me. They're listed in the agenda there, so please have a look. Otherwise, Nick, we can jump to item number 2, incorporation of Open Knowledge Foundation. And we can have
well, I would like to formally move our thanks to Anna for terrific service while she's been with us. So there you are. That's the motion, and I'm going to, like a number of other things, I'm going to assume it's carried unless I have objections. Okay, Anna, everybody agrees you've been terrific. You've been seconded, and all sorts of things have happened. So thank you very much.
Can I add one last note to it?
Yes, Pia is to speak in favour of the motion?
Oh, I'm massively in favour. I just want to add to the point that, Anna, you've been absolutely vital for so much of the stuff that's happened with OKFN and with GovHack. So you can be a little embarrassed, but please just recognise that you. Thank you so much for all of us and for the entire team.
Thanks, Pia. Thank you. No, thank you for allowing me to participate in this for 3 years. So it's been great fun, and I'll be around.
Good.
Lovely.
Okay. So David, am I safe to move on to item 2, or is there more to be done in the handover?
Nope. The main item of business is this incorporation. So let's get going on that. We're already halfway through the meeting.
So basically, I would propose. I mean, whoever wants to speak to this should feel welcome to. But I'm assuming that lots of people have given careful thought to this, and unless there are strong disagreements, I would be expecting the board to feel similarly in agreement. So is there anyone going to talk to it, or are we just going to agree to it? Because I'm happy to agree to it.
I think it's pretty much an exception thing. I guess just to confirm everyone that will be incorporating in Victoria initially, that it does not mean that we cannot incorporate in other places. I guess the easiest thing is everybody could give us a thumbs up to show their support, or a thumbs down if they have a comment they want to give. Stephen?
Oh, where are the thumbs?
Thumbs up there. We've got one for Marcus. Yes, thank you. Fiona?
I can't see thumbs.
Thumbs up there.
I see.
I'm kidding. And Anne? Yes, I've got yours. Michael, your thumbs up from NICTA? Yes, we have a thumbs up, and then of course there's my thumbs up. So, Nick, we've got agreement.
This is disgracefully analog, these thumbs up. I didn't know that we did analog thumbs up.
Thumbs up.
Well, we're using the Roman system now. Fiona's been teaching me. Incorrect, though.
Digital. We have a digital thumb up. A digital. Well, not thumbs. One thumb. Thumb up. Marcus. Anyway. Okay. So we have now. By way of analog voting, moved beyond digitally to item number 3, Pia Waugh, to update on GovHack, which goes from strength to strength. And who better to tell us about going from strength to strength than Pia Waugh?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Nick. I'll jump into it. I'll just note that my voice really has almost gone, so I'm going to try and keep this a little bit quick. But the first, we've actually published a fairly in-depth report, which goes into how it all went. The core thing that will be of interest to this committee is that it's growing rapidly. We're getting a lot of interest, and for next year, we've already got loads of sponsors wanting to come on next year. We've already got basically a lot of hackers very excited about how it's gone. Of course, from behind the scenes, we can see all the little errors, and we're getting a lot of lessons learned from this year that we're going to be improving upon for next year. But 2015 looks like it's going to grow even bigger. So there's a couple of core outcomes. The first one is that everyone's kind of buggered right now, and we're still all too tired to get to the next stage immediately. But we were hoping to have a $10,000 surplus to give back to OKF Australia. That is not the case. Some of our costs blew out largely because of the Red Carpet Awards. So we don't know the final amount yet. I'm still waiting to finalise our exact expenses, but I'm hoping to have about $3,000 to give back to OKF, which we should be able to finalise by the time I get back from this trip. So I'll report back to the committee off, I guess, out of session with a report about the final finances. One upside, however, is that one of our nodes, Victoria, and Fiona's obviously on this committee, and I'll let her report on that particular, but there is some other funding that might be able to come forward from one of the local budgets, but the national budget will only probably be able to give about $3,000 or $4,000 back. As soon as I get that finalised, I'll let the team know. And the cost blowouts were basically around the Red Carpet Awards, and transporting 60 people from around the country. Just we knew it would be a bit more expensive than we expected, but nah. Right. So I'll report back to this committee with a full financial report after we've got those things finalised for the committee's consideration. For next year, we're looking to have a meeting on the 8th of October. It'll be sort of a 6 p.m. start and probably go for 2 or 3 hours. National team members have been invited, local team members are being invited, and if anyone from here wants to get involved, let us know, but we'll also probably open it up and invite anyone who wants to become like a core committee member or contributor to the GovHack for next year. Will be invited to come into that meeting. And the idea is that we'll spend a few hours and possibly over 2 or 3 sessions if we need to talk about the future of GovHack. The general recipe, if you like, is pretty good. We're pretty happy that it's achieving what it should be achieving, and we're pretty focused on hackers as rock stars and making sure that they have an absolutely amazing time first and foremost, and also showcasing, you know, technical excellence in Australia and putting friendly but upward pressure on agencies to open up more data, and that's all working out really well and really positively. So we think it's working quite well, and we think it's also drawing a nice baseline for how these things should be run, which will help keep other such events. It'll give people something to compare other events to. So if another event tries to do it in a highly proprietary way or you know, slight non-community friendly way, then people have something to compare against. But in terms of the future, in terms of making it scalable, there's certainly some tweaks we need to do. We need to, this year we outsourced 2 roles. Like we had obviously the massive support from Nick around the administration, but we also outsourced sponsor liaison and team liaison. So we had 2 people paid part-time to help with those 2 roles because they grew so substantially. We ended up dealing with over 100 sponsors across all the local events and the national events. I think nationally we ended up with about 20 sponsors, so that was still a lot to deal from a national perspective, but to have another 80 sponsors in all the local events was ridiculous. And from a team's perspective, 11 teams really did push us, so we're trying to improve and automate where possible to make sure that in future those, you know, that there's better support for teams, even though we think the sport was okay, but it can be improved always. But to also trying to automate that as much as possible to take as much of the burden off local organisers as we possibly can. We're looking at anyway, there's pages and pages and pages of lessons learned, and we'll share that back with this committee if you're interested in that information. The final thing is that all up, overall the Red Carpet Awards, which was a bit of an experiment, went overwhelmingly well. We had a few people compare it to and say that it was like the X Factor for geeks, which we thought was nice. The idea that it really showed things off. It was such a, you know, the best dressed meetup of geeks you'll ever find, and just showing off just absolute excellence in our community. Really opened the eyes of a lot of people involved, and Adam Spencer, for what it's worth, is so stupendously keen to be involved next year. We might be able to get him for free, which would be nice. So all in all, it's going really well. We're really happy. There's some surplus that should come back to the committee, which we'll be able to finalise in the next few weeks, I hope. And there are lessons learnt, but overall we're pretty happy with how it's going. And we've already had the International Digital Humanities Conference want to actually run their event to align with our timing so that they can get the international digital humanities community involved, and we've got schools wanting to get involved and more universities, and anyway, it's just going from strength to strength, as Nick says, which is quite good. I'll just take some of the questions from the side. Hold on.
Brilliant, Pia. I think that's about the time we've got for that item. Nick, or there was one question, there was a couple of written in the board here, Pia, that you might quickly answer if you've got a minute or two. One from Anne: the hacks have shown incredible potential to produce valuable functionality to the community in many diverse ways. How do we plan to assist to realize that value through getting those apps out there where they're most needed, e.g. into intro government agencies, venture capital, etc.? Also, another comment from Fiona: in Victoria, the Technology Innovation Fund is going to make up $140K available for investment to carry forward promising hacks. We're aiming to get at least 3 projects through the process and to the viable. Do you have a minute more comment on that, Pia, you want to put forward?
Yep. The very quick version is we put a lot of thought into hack longevity. We don't want GovHack itself to turn into something bigger than a national competition and a and an awards ceremony, because we think that keeping that tight is good. but creating those opportunities for longevity. So we've got a HACS longevity page, which we launched this year at the Red Carpet Awards. It talks about not just economic opportunities for people to commercialise and that kind of thing, but also opportunities to get involved in the community. So obviously, you know, we talk up things like OKF Australia. So we're saying to people, see GovHack is just the beginning. Get involved in the community. Get involved in these kind of showcases. Those that have been have opted into procurement opportunities can be approached for procurement opportunities. Those that have opted into different mailing lists. I think Fiona can coordinate with Alex to get you the list for the OKFN mailing list, so then you can send out a first email to all those people sometime in the next few weeks, I would suggest. And Code for Australia. Anyway, the point is that rather than trying to have it centralised, we're trying to take a community approach to the longevity ideas. So if anyone has any additional stuff to add to the HACS longevity page, please add it there. But the idea is to not make GovHack have a big scope creep, but rather to keep the scope of GovHack really tight and to have it be part of a ecosystem of initiatives to help teams move forward. So that we think that approach will work. We think it's working okay this year. We're open to people doing more and more showcases. And one of the other things is that we asked teams up front if they would like their hacks to be showcased on on their relative portal. So most of the open data portals have like a showcase of use cases. So any of the ones that ticked that use DataGov.au data, for instance, will be added to the use cases of DataGov.au in the coming weeks. Well, month, maybe in the coming month. So we think that there's a few options there. We'll see how that goes, and then we can tweak that for next year.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Tia. Really appreciate you visiting as well. Nick, back over to you for item number 4.
Are you hanging around or are you leaving now?
I'm actually nearly out of battery, so I'd kind of like to go if that's okay. But if you need me, I can hang around for another 10 minutes.
I was hoping to find some extra time in the rest of the agenda so we could come back to that. But if you want to go, we may not. That may not happen. So thanks for that, and we'll move on.
That's okay. I'm happy to come onto the next meeting when I'm back, if I'm in the country. To talk about it more, but Fiona and Steve are well across it, and Anna as well.
Okay.
So, but let me know if there's anything else I can do.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Pia. And I'll move to item 4, website and the new brand. That all looks fine to me, and would propose that it go through on the nod unless somebody has something that they think is important to contribute there. It's a nice looking brand, and the request we've got from Laura makes sense.
Yep. And Nick, the only other thing is Michael wanted to highlight how important it is that we thank Pia for coming along, and obviously it's great news to hear anytime we get money, so it's brilliant that GovHack is going to move some of that through to us. I just wanted to make that point. Yeah, okay. The only one thing to note, Nick, which I do not want a discussion on, ideally, because it's a what color should we paint the fence discussion, is that OKFN, or rather Open Knowledge, and I've already made the mistake, they don't want us to use the acronyms anywhere as much as possible. So.
Well, that's on the agenda, so I've said that we agree with that unless somebody wants to disagree with it.
Does that make sense to everyone, that we should all officially be calling it Open Knowledge Australia rather than OKF or OKFN and so forth and so on? I just want to make sure everyone understands that, because it is the branding that we'll use across the website and all other places as we start to roll out these logos and all the rest.
Yeah, any concerns? Otherwise, we'll let that go through. The other thing, if you can just put that logo back up, David, it's just occurred to me. I wonder whether, I don't know whether this is an Australian thing or whether it's more general, but I look at that and I suddenly realise that one of the terms of abuse of greens is that they're green on the outside and red on the inside. So that's what our logo is. So I'm not sure that that's such a great thing, but there you are. Seems that that's the way it is. Okay, it's a nice. Otherwise, it's a nice looking logo. It does also look rather like a watermelon, with some pips having been removed. Anyway, so we'll go on to item 5. So key activity happening in each city. So do we want to go around the table and hear from people?
So Nick, I was thinking, ideally what we were hoping to do in this is actually a text update. So if everyone could hop into the Etherpad right now, and any news that they have heard from one of these cities or states, obviously, and if you could put in any info you've heard from Sydney or other groups, Fiona from Melbourne, same with Marcus. Marcus, you're mostly based in Sydney, aren't you? Steve, obviously Canberra, and any other news we've heard from the other areas. If you could put one item of news, thanks. People are starting to do it now. Nick, if you want to read out any of those items as they're popping up to highlight them, we can just spend a couple of quick minutes on this and get through it.
Yeah, well, you can all see it. There's nothing much I can add. I might say that this afternoon I spoke with Jill Risley, who's just recently taken up a role in corporate social responsibility and governance and stuff like that in REA Group, and apparently they've been running hackathons for years and have them coming up in a month or two, and then again in December. So anyway, that's for your information. So Steve Bennett undertaking Hacker in Residence role in Victorian Government in partnership with Code for Australia. That's good. I don't know how interested people are. It's not really very hack-worthy, but David Halperin is taking up residence in Victoria as Thinker in Residence. It's a charming term, Thinker in Residence. He's supposed to be in residence for 2 years. He, in fact, is in residence for 2 weeks twice for 2 weeks for 2 years. So 4 times in all. But anyway, he's a good guy. He heads up the Nudge unit, and will be doing some interesting things with Vic Health.
Looks good, and we're getting lots of nice updates there. Please continue to put those updates in there, because I will publish this up on the blog so people are aware of ongoings. Other than that, I think we've pushed the meeting quite fast, which would be great if we could end the meeting early. There is an AOB, and underneath the AOB are a bunch of other suggested items that have come up on the listserv, as well as people talking on the mail. Nick, could you facilitate a little conversation around which one of those items below might make a good first topic for the next board call? We might want to continue the conversation you've been having around the economic value of open data. But if you could go through those, and if we could get a consensus so we know what we're going to be talking at the start of the next board call.
Yeah. So okay. So the items here are GovHack and steps forward. So taking that further with Pia. Summary of recent talks on open data, eGov and Gov2. Well, I've sort of done that twice now. So if people want more, fine, but I'm not sure that's good. New South Wales innovation and open data. Any other thoughts for topics for next board meeting?
There's Nick. It does continue on. There's also the health hack update and discussion.
Yeah. So Maya, is Maya there? I haven't seen her.
No, Maya's traveling abroad through her wartime tour. Might want to have her update on that.
Okay. Well, that sounds good. In the news, potentially interesting things to G20 report launch. We've done that. The eGov agenda, government doing things for and to people, Gov2. Yeah. Well, we can. We've had a bit of a chat about that. Code for Australia, Hacker in Residence program. Open science workshops, we haven't really talked about that. I mean, one topic I think of is maybe I'll just write it in there and we can come up at some time, which is coding in schools. That can be done in such a lightweight way now with Code Academy and so on. It's amazing that more of it isn't going on.
So Nick, I think the easiest thing for people to do is to go in and +1 the ones that they would like to talk about, and then that'll help scope what you and the co-chair want to talk about next. So if everyone could file in and put their +1s, Nick, if you want to comment throughout.
Yeah, well, I'm just put one in. I must say my attention was drawn by other people's +1. I've put a +1 on Hacker in Residence. Bidding for funds once okay if Australia has legal status. Google Impact Challenge. So yeah, those are the two things that are getting votes at the moment. Open Knowledge Australia's getting a vote, as is Data Journalism Community, and I would be able to facilitate some introductions to Margaret Simons, who's continuing to do some stuff there. And if anyone wants, I think there's a data journalism event coming up at the Centre for Advancing Journalism in Melbourne. If anyone wants to contact me out of session, I can give them the details. We've got more votes for bidding for funds than anywhere else. As they say, follow the money.
So Nick, can we have one last whip around with the entire committee and get them to just pick the one and talk to it about what they think is valuable for a couple minutes?
Yes, so it seems at least a naive participatory democratic method says that bidding for funds is at the top of the list. So I'll ask people for their views on whether there is a better topic than that, or if they want to just raise some other, some relevant other issue.
I'll jump to Anne first. Anne, take it away.
I really wanted to just briefly raise the New South Wales Government initiative around innovation in open data. They'll be calling for expressions of interest in early September, so if we don't put something together in September, we'll miss the boat on it, and I think we have a lot to offer. So would I be able to briefly get some thoughts about how Open Knowledge could participate in that initiative?
Yeah, good idea.
So some of the possibilities that I was thinking of, it ranges from we could give technical recommendations about how to make open data available for maximum usability by hackers and commercials. We could possibly draw from the international experience of Open Knowledge, the Open Knowledge community, to give some indications of what's worked well elsewhere. If anyone here has direct experience on that, that would be very useful. We could engage with the hacker community and the startup community to get some feedback about what data they want from New South Wales Government and how they want it provided to them, so we can just provide that kind of feedback about what people are looking for and provide that pull factor. That's what I've thought of so far, and I would like to write a submission around those kind of ideas. So I guess I'm looking for the board to say, is it okay to do that? And do you have any other ideas or ways that we could possibly position ourselves or participate?
I've got one thing to say on that. Probably, in effect, declaring a conflict of interest, because they manage the contract by New South Wales at the moment, securing the platform. Link Digital, my company, would probably submit something for that EOI process, but I think what's maybe the relevant thing there is that an organisation like Link Digital or any other organisation that wanted to submit something for the EOI process, if they wanted to filter it through the Open Knowledge Foundation, that might be a good forum through which they could get some good feedback. I'm not confident that the Open Knowledge in Australia group would be the right group to submit to such a thing, but to facilitate or help people get better submissions might be the right thing. So help joining the dots, forming more groups that have more value to offer through the EOI process.
I'm going to put a pin on that topic so we can make it around the thing. Fiona, the topic which you feel would be most valuable, and great idea. I think I'd consider it, continue to just throw in the ideas and get on list and make it happen. Fiona?
Yeah, I would say to Anne, just go for it with writing a submission. Steve Bennett and I wrote a submission together to the Victorian Government's Open Data Policy Review, so I would say go for it. Something I would like to see talked about next time, I would like to invite Steve Bennett to update on the Hacker in Residence program and how that's been working and how he's been able to use that to carry forward some of the the hacks from GovHack, and as a way of, I suppose, doing some more, capacity building within government.
Excellent stuff from Fiona. We'll jump over to Marcus. Marcus, your thoughts on key topics to be talking about in this group?
So the two I plus one was the data journalism theme. I think there's some really nice examples in the UK, a little bit in Europe, and there's a few interesting data journalists emerging in places like the Fairfax Press in Australia. Pulling something together, some wisdom, and getting something back into our community and publicising that, I think, is a good thing. My own interest for flagging the Asia-Pacific open knowledge stuff is also a conversation I had with Pia, because one of my other projects works with a lot of the research communities across the Asia-Pacific around access to data. And I'm trying to find ways of doing things to bring together communities like that in a world where maybe the term GovHack might have some additional sensitivities that we have to watch out for. But that's it from me.
Brilliant. Thanks, Marcus. We'll jump to Michael, who's here with me in Melbourne. Take it away, Michael.
I support the funding initiative. I think that's a really good one, and sort of important for OK, the establishment of OK and getting it off and running.
Brilliant. Thank you, Michael. Stephen, over to you.
Yeah, I also support the funding one simply because I think it's a good catalyst of discussion around what the purpose of Open Knowledge Australia will be. If we can form our pitch to an agency or a government jurisdiction throughout Australia to give us money, then we have to have that pitch correct, so it will bring that sort of thought process together. And I also know that, at least within the Department of Communications federally, it's a ripe environment to be pitching for funding if we have the right message.
Brilliant. Thanks, Stephen. And Nicholas, you've got 5 minutes to wrap the whole thing up for us.
Well, I'm not going to spend 5 minutes. I'm going to say that it looks like we want to go with the funds, data journalism. I mean, I think, look, we only have to decide what we're doing for the next discussion, and that's subject to any revision we might, in our wisdom, make anyway. But I would suggest that we go with bidding for funds, and we have a good list of topics that we've now culled down and identified important things that we'll want to speak about in the future, and/or at the next board meeting if there's work, if there's an item that we need to make progress on. So I'm very happy to leave it at that.
Brilliant. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, everyone else. If I could get a wave from everybody, we'll see you next time.
That's all I can do now. I've been taught to do this. Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Cheers, everyone. Bye-bye.
We're done. Yeah. Bye-bye.
Okay. Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Cheers.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.